all you can do is take the walk, do the work, believe in yourself, and then wherever you end up is where you're supposed to be.
Jane, it is lovely to
Hi.
chat with you. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Witchy Ways is very fun. It's a just such a fun film. I love the romance tone of it, and also like it just draws you in. Can you tell us, where did it come from?
It came from a desire to work with Miriam Hassler, who's a friend of mine. She plays Danny the Witch. And we've been talking off and on for a few years now. She was my behind the scenes photographer on Crazy Pitches. And we got pretty close after that. And then during COVID, of course, nobody was doing anything, but she came to town in that little pocket where, everybody thought, yeah, we can go out and the bars opened up for a minute. And she's like, I just got a camera and I have a great DP and I have a great producer. Why don't we just make something? And I was like, yeah, let's make something. And then I was like, oh no, I gotta write something. Like, shoot. Uh, so there was like a little, I originally tried to take another script I had and like make it inexpensive because we knew we had to make it inexpensive because we weren't going to be able to, make it fast if we didn't make it cheap. But that was sort of the genesis. But then I was watching Discovery of Witches, and so I had witches on the brain, and I had done a movie called Crazy Bitches, which was a horror comedy. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll do something kind of in the darker vein of things, but I just wasn't feeling it. Like I just couldn't get there. I mean, sometimes you come up, I know I'm not good with like an idea that isn't driven from something I care about. Um, so I started just watching a ton of movies, just like looking for inspiration. And I landed on Practical Magic. And I was just like,
Yeah.
oh man, that movie was so good. It was so good. And it had this lightness of tone and this kind of like down to earth relationship to magic. And I just liked all of that. And I've always wanted to do a rom-com too. So I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll just throw a rom-com in, or a little rom-com romance in and still have my witch and my ghost, which is what I wanted in the first place. So that's where it really came from. And then that became the root. I just started researching. I researched witches and then discovered there's a whole community of witches, a very large community of witches out there that nobody's actually written honestly about.
Mm.
And I researched ghosts and tried to like figure out how could I really ground this movie in something that felt real, while still kind of going on my usual style, which is a little bit heightened and a little bit moments of maybe tipping into camp and, you know, definitely got to get some good comedy moments in there. Like I was like, how do I do what I normally do but throw this rom-com and this supernatural element into it?
But it's interesting because that's a very fine line to walk, where it's sort of like, because you can go full on broad comedy like a
Yeah.
Ghostbusters style, or you cannot. And this film dips its toe into so many different genres. I think it's very interesting. Um,
Yeah.
and in the midst of that, there seems to be this attempt to help people under witch culture or Wiccan. That word isn't used in the film, but witch culture. I was wondering if there was something that you found interesting about it as you were doing your research that you didn't know before.
Well, a lot. I knew nothing, to be
Mm.
perfectly honest. I actually just was like, okay, I've got this witch and she's gonna write it, she's gonna do a spell. So like how do I write a spell? And then I went online, I was like, oh my God, like what is this? And then I started researching and found out like Pew Research did this, poll or whatever they do. And it was at that time 2018, and there were 1.8 million self-identifying witches in the United States. And that was just the people that were willing to go on record. And I just found it fascinating. But the more I researched, like my neighbor was, I said, I think I need to do a moon ritual. And my neighbor's like, oh, you come down. I'll help you. I'll guide you through the first one. And I was like, what? Oh, really? Huh. And then, I mean, things evolved. Turns out she's a witch. And it turns out somebody else I know does regular moon rituals and never said anything to me. And like, I was kind of surprised at how far reaching it was. But at this point, I mean, I really loved what I loved about it. I do moon rituals now. Sometimes it'll just be one a month. Sometimes we'll do both a full and a new. I've got a little group of people that I do it with. I find it a great way to remember, to remind myself of my goals and also to maybe remind myself of something that isn't serving me to let go of it. And whether you believe the moon is moving you or not, these are things that are good to do for yourself, and those constant reminders of what direction you're headed in. I liked the idea that, which is so Wiccan, pagan, there's Celtic, there's a lot of different practices. Some people create their own practice. There's green witches and kitchen witches, and they have their own sort of, each type of witch has their sort of own maybe structure that they follow. But the overriding theme seems to be self-empowerment, which I really loved. This idea that you don't get, it's not like God comes and just goes, "Oh, let me ping, you prayed and so you have this thing." It's actually like it doesn't work unless you're actually working toward your goal in the first place, unless you actually are putting what you have into succeeding at whatever your goal is. So I found that really um something to adopt. I saw that as a good, as a like a positive. I also think that witches, for the most part, a lot of them are very into the earth and protecting the earth and animals, and a lot of them are vegan. And there's just a lot of good sort of outward looking ideas that they ascribe to. And I was impressed with that.
Well, one of the things that comes up in this film is one of the characters says that all the power you need, you already have.
Yeah,
And I was wondering how you connected with that, and do you think that's true?
I do think it's true. I mean, I think that most, and this isn't just women, but a lot of women aren't really brought up respecting their own power, their own intelligence or their own ability to like stand out in the crowd. Like there's this sort of expectation of being a little bit under so that nobody feels you're too anything. That's something that I actually address in Crazy Bitches too. It's a theme for me, this idea that we should all be as big as we actually are, just to own ourselves fully and not be worried about how the world perceives that. If you're living your truth, then it doesn't really matter how anybody else perceives it, you know. And so that theme really resonates with me, this idea that and I know that I can tell when I'm making myself small to make sure other people feel more comfortable around me. And I can tell when I'm walking in fully in my body and fully in my power, as you might say, and the difference. And I can tell that sometimes I turn people off when I'm walking in fully in my power. That like maybe it scares them, or maybe that they perceive it as arrogance or whatever it is. Um, but fighting the instinct to actually squelch it back down is what I'm practicing now, because I feel like everybody, if they walk out with fully present in their own body, they can achieve anything that they want to achieve. You know, maybe it doesn't always look like you think it's going to look. So I got to say that, like, you have these ideas of what your world's going to look like and what your life's going to look like at a certain point. All you can do is take the walk, do the work, believe in yourself, and then wherever you end up is where you're supposed to be.
I love that. I love that. And I love there's a real feminine strength to the film that I really appreciate. And it's interesting. Now you sort of touched on this too, but there's also this sort of, I wouldn't even say it's a subplot, but this side story of being who you are. This acknowledgement of being who you are proudly,
Yeah.
which I think is beautiful in this particular, because of course we see characters. The main character, I can't think of her name. I'm sorry. Uh,
Oh, is it Eve?
no, the one who's
Danny,
yes,
the
who
witch. Yeah.
who doesn't want people to know. She's afraid of people to know. And
Yeah.
what is the power of being able to reconcile that and be who you truly are?
I think it's complicated. You have to, I think you have to be willing to not be liked by everybody. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we hold back because we're afraid of what the outside's going to see. You know, society, our family, our current group of friends, the people we work with, whatever it is, you know, most people make an effort to sort of fit in because it's a more comfortable way to go forward. And sometimes not fitting in can feel risky. And
Mm.
I think that there are, is particularly for witches, I think there are repercussions in some arenas for being truly who you are, like letting people know that this is your faith, this is your spirituality, and this is how you function in life. In some parts of the world, they're still getting stoned. There's, still current incidences of murder or torture, and at the very least, if you're in the United States and your neighbor might just think you're weird all of a sudden, or roll their eyes and just think you've gone slightly nuts, or whatever it is. So it's scary to sort of be out. And I kind of, in a way, parallel it to the LGBTQ community. And they made strides and they're much farther ahead actually than the witch community is. But it's the same idea. I call it the witches being in the broom closet because, they're still afraid to just say it out loud in so many circumstances. Um, so I see these parallels between communities that are striving to be able to be honest about who they are in a public space, or even with family, for that matter.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate that, and I think this is a film that celebrates not only the LGBTQ community, but in witch culture, but just the courage to be who you are in that way. I think that's wonderful. I know we're running out of time,
Yeah.
but honestly, Jane, thank you so much for the time. I really do appreciate it. The film is so much fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I like it too. I've seen it a bunch now, and every time I smile when I leave it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a very joyful film. I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Thank you.